Okay, I'm Melanie Harris, Strategy Director with Complete College America. I'm happy to be here today. I'm focusing this session on proactive advising with our phenomenal panelists today. So we have Dr. Sean Bridgen, Associate Director of External and Institutional Partnerships at NACADA, the Global Community for Academic Advising. We also have Brandy Probst, Director of Elon 101 and Assistant Director of Academic Advising at Elon University. Dr. Loxley Nibbs, Lead Academic Advisor at Florida Gulf Coast University. Dr. Kimberly Smith, Associate Provost of Student Success Initiatives at Virginia Tech University, and Dr. Jermaine Pipkins, Dean of Success Coaching at Dallas College. And so with all of that, I am excited to turn it over to Dr. Sean Bridgen to kick us off today.
Hello, everyone. Really happy to be here. I'm very excited to partner with CCA on this really important topic. I wanted to tell you a little bit about NACADA. NACADA is the Global Community for Academic Advising, and we aspire to be the premier association in the globe for the development and dissemination of innovative theory and research and practice related to academic advising. I have been with the executive office now for a little over a year, and before I worked for NACADA, I worked at various college campuses, most recently the University of Pittsburgh as the founding director of advising at the newly founded School of Computing and Information. So the panelists who are going to join us today are very experienced. They're very knowledgeable about proactive advising, and are going to talk a lot about the things that that are happening on their campuses, the ways it can be used. And just to give a little bit of a background on what proactive advising is, now I've been in this game for quite a while now. It's been about 20 years. And I remember when I first heard of this, and it was called intrusive advising. So if you were looking for research on this, you might want to look for both terms, intrusive advising and proactive advising, because they've kind of been used interchangeably, but I think the term has morphed to become proactive now, because intrusive made it sound like advisors were going to go start knocking on people's doors and pulling them out of bed trying to get them to class. And I actually had administrators who actually kind of thought advisors should be doing that in some places. So we had to talk a little bit more about what the role of academic advising is on a university campus. And so when I think about proactive advising, what I think about is how can advisors create communication plans and create the environment where students can have the information that they need and the access to the people they need, the resources they need at a moment's notice. So rather than students having to go searching for something, how can they easily get involved or find out what they need and get in touch with the folks they need right off the bat? So a lot of the ways that that I had done that in the past were using a learning management system so to curate content so students could easily 24 hours a day access information, to have used various technologies for example, raising warning flags and creating feedback loops so that advisors and students could keep a constant flow of information going back and forth. So it was more than just the email that goes out once a semester saying it's time to register your classes. It was creating more of a relationship and building that relationship at the ground level and letting the student know that the advisor is there and helping them find the information very, very easily. So that when you think of a proactive approach, I really think of it that way, like putting everything right within, um, for lack of a better metaphor, arm's reach of a student, so they don't have to go digging and searching and hunting for information when they see it. Because as we also know, students need information at various times during the day, sometimes at 3 in the morning, sometimes when an advisor might not be available. I don't know about Brandy and Jermaine and Kimberly and Loxley, but I don't do so well staying up till 2 in the morning anymore. But I want my students to be able to get the information they need and be able to access things they need quickly and without really having to put too much labor in on their part. So when I think about proactive, that's how I think about it. And if you look into the literature, you're going to see lots of different definitions of proactive advising, lots of different ways it has been implemented at different campuses, with different populations, and you'll find there's been a lot of success in students using this approach in particular to help students connect better with their advisor, connect better with their institution, and really foster a sense of belonging. Because when advisors and advising systems are proactive, it can help the student feel like we care because we really do. And sometimes when you have a roster of maybe 500 students, it's hard to express that care. But if you use proactive techniques, proactive methods, you can close that gap pretty efficiently, I think. So that is my quick introduction to proactive advising and NACADA, and I'm going to hand it over to Brandy.
Good afternoon. I'm Brandy Probst. I am the director of Elon 101 at Elon University, and I'm going to share my screen here really quick. Let's see. Sorry, there we go, slideshow. So sorry about that. I am, again, Brandy Probst, the director of Elon 101 at Elon University. Elon is a medium-sized institution. We have about 7,000 students, including graduate students, but we are a very high-touch institution. Our first year class is about 1,700 pre-COVID. And so we have a course called Elon 101, which is our first year seminar program. And I'm going to go through just our first year advising structure and give some details about the course, and then I'm happy to answer any more specific questions about the course in the Q&A. But I'm going to talk about integrating academic advising in a first year seminar program as a proactive advising measure. And so for Elon 101, we have, because we have about 1,700 first year students, and this is pre-COVID numbers, we typically have about 100 plus sections of Elon 101, and the instructors of the course serve as the advisor to the students enrolled in their section. And so the courses have about 15 to 17 students per section. So therefore, it is a small course. The instructors get to know their advisees one-on-one. The course also has a peer educator who serves as a form of peer support. And so that is the structure in terms of the students that are in the course. In terms of our first year advising structure and how we put students into Elon 101, I have to take a step back and kind of let you know what our current first year advising structure is. And so over the summer, while our students are taking care of all the things on the list they need to enter the university in the fall semester, we have what we call our Elon Bound Pre-Orientation Program, which is a part of our overall first year experience program. As a part of that, our office, the Office of Academic Advising, we send students a course request form. And on that form, they tell us their preferences, their rankings for courses, their major of interest. They share their academic history. They can also do a letter to the advisor and kind of have conversations with us through that letter and tell us a little bit more about themselves. And then from that course request form, advisors within our office, we schedule students, we build a schedule for the first semester for every single first year student. So they get a one-on-one, they get an individual that looks at their course requests and then goes and creates a schedule for them. And so for us, when they come to the institution, they have not learned about our core curriculum, the registration system. They haven't registered themselves yet. And so Elon 101 is a huge part of that process. And with that being said, a lot of the pieces that they learn in that course in terms of the structure of the course is related to the advising content that they need to know in order to be successful at the institution. So they need to be able to know the Elon core curriculum, which is our general education studies program. They need to know how to register for courses because they have not done that process on their own yet. They also need to, and Mel, I think you can go to the next slide there. I think the curriculum shows up. Yeah. They also need to learn how to read their degree audit. They need to learn how to read the academic catalog to know what majors and minors are available to them in terms of their major exploration. And so in addition to that, they learn first year transition topics. They learn about the call to honor ceremony, but we use an advising as teaching model. In teaching them how to use those tools and those resources, but they go through what every single first year student completes an Elon plan, or what we call a graduation plan. And that's kind of their culminating experience. Every single student walks out of the course with a graduation plan, and that plan is holistic. That plan is their major requirements, their minor requirements, if they have a minor, in addition to the core curriculum requirements, as well as any type of experiences that they want to be a part of while they're at Elon, and any other activities or co-curricular experiences that they want to experience. And so a huge part of the course, about the first 6 to 7 weeks is first year transition topics, getting them acclimated to campus. But the second half of the course is really dedicated to the academic advising and planning pieces around the time that our normal registration period would start. And so we teach them how to register, we teach them all of those tools, and then that then builds into creating an actual graduation plan. And that plan is 4 years or whatever time frame that they plan to be at the institution. So they get that one-on-one every week with a instructor, because the course is once a week for 55 minutes. And so if you think about that, that is an academic advisor that will meet with their students in a class setting, right, with other students who they built a community with. But this is your advisor. You get to see your advisor once a week. And I always think back to my undergraduate experience. I went to a large institution. My advisor had 400 advisees. And so I had to kind of find her whenever I needed her, because I came in as a declared student. But for Elon 101, students come in as undeclared or undecided. So meaning undeclared, you have a major of interest, but you have not declared, or undecided, meaning that you're not sure what you want your major to be. And so they have the opportunity to declare at the end of the first semester. But that first semester is dedicated to the academic advising and planning period, so that we know they have the tools that they need to be successful. I will stop there and then transition to Loxley. And like I said, I'm happy to answer questions in the chat as well as during the Q&A period.
Thank you, Brandy. Hi, everyone. My name is Loxley Nibbs, and I'm the lead academic advisor for Team Natural Sciences within the College of Arts and Sciences. It's pretty long saying all of that, but what it is, I'm in the largest college on our campus, and we've actually segmented our function since we're the largest college and we have the most majors. So I am the lead academic advisor for the sciences. We have team arts and humanities, and we have team social sciences. So my perspective on this as it relates to holistic advising is that as a Black male, I try to make sure that our minority or ethnically diverse students are taken care of, that the kind of advising that they get is equitable as well. I'm at a large public white institution, so we have very few students who are on the marginalized population. So I want to make sure that I'm creating what I call welcoming spaces, inclusive spaces for these students. So when they walk into the office, they feel like they're welcome. And now, because of the pandemic, we are advising our students via the telephone. We use teleadvising and teleconferencing via Microsoft Teams and Zoom. So those are the population that I pretty much put myself out there on a limb with my team to make sure that we are meeting these students, giving them that holistic advising, making sure that we are focusing on their overall development as students. Now, the way we do that is that we have to be culturally competent with the advising. So on my team, I have 2 of us are Black males, we have a Black female, and we have a white gentleman on the team. So we make sure that the advising that we are providing, not that we pick on students and because you're Black, you're going to go to this person. The students are, we see our student by assigned caseload, but we make sure that we are competent and our students feel that sense of welcome when they come to our offices. They're not intimidated. And that's one of the things that we have to pay attention to when we talk about holistic advising, that we are creating those spaces and making sure that our students do not feel that there are barriers for them to come to our offices and to schedule an appointment to visit with us as academic advisors. So again, when we talk about holistic advising, we want to make sure that we are focusing on the total development of the student. When we talk about proactive advising, that we are doing, as Sean said, so one of the things that we do in our team, we have an assigned person who deals with students when they fall into what we call academic jeopardy. It could be warning, it could be probation, it could be dismissal and reinstatement. I handle issues of academic and amnesty, and my amnesty means that I'm talking to the student. They have to schedule a series of appointments with me. I do not just write a letter for a student to get them back within the institution. And our amnesty is, if you've been away from the institution for 5 years, you can ask to wipe all your grades from the time if you did real bad, and you get what we call a fresh start. It probably is called something else us at your institution a Fresh Start initiative, but we set up a series of meetings with our students to make sure that they are getting the information they need. We don't just write the letter for them to appear before the committee for decision to be made. We make sure that they follow these steps and they are having these meetings with advisors. Again, there's a cultural competency with that. So students have a choice of who they want to go with and who they want to meet with as far as that is concerned. We know that we have to have that piece a part of it because we want to create what we call those welcoming spaces. We can sometimes the advising sometimes from a certain population, we use that one size fit all approach and think that when we're talking to our students, especially for Black males, that we're going to use the same advising that we talk to a white male about. We have to change the rhetoric. We have to change the dialogue. So we make sure that on our team is pretty diverse and team natural sciences. So the student has a choice who they meet with and who they feel comfortable with. So that's when I talk about the cultural competency piece, that if you don't have those in your spaces, you need to create those atmosphere for your students, because sometimes I see we invite these students on our campuses and they don't feel welcome and they start not showing up for the appointment, they get intimidated. So as a strategy, I'd love to see and I'd like to share with you that have a cultural competency piece with your advising. It makes a difference. It helps with retention. It helps with your graduation rate. It helps with mentoring, and it helps students to feel safe when they come into your spaces. And I'm going to turn it over to Kim for her to talk about her piece.
Sorry, I'm gonna unmute myself. Thank you, Loxley. I appreciate that. And so I would like to share with you all my screen just quickly here. So I want to talk with you a little bit about some of the work that we have done at Virginia Tech, specifically related to social justice and academic advising. And it is primarily related to the idea that, as you all know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, we were just seeing a lot of violence going on in the country. And as we were getting ready for students to return to campus, we knew that we had to make sure our advisors were very prepared to respond to the students with whatever needs or concerns that they might have related to some of this civil unrest. And so, you know, as my role at Virginia Tech, one of my areas of responsibility is overseeing professional development and training for all advisors. We have over 500 folks who are designated as advisors. That includes faculty advisors as well as professional advisors. And so as we started to have these conversations to ensure that advisors were prepared to have these conversations, most of my colleagues in the advising world felt very uncomfortable and very unprepared to host these conversations. And I must say, similar to Loxley, I'm at a PWI, a predominantly white institution. We don't have a very large percentage of underrepresented students, but yet we know that they have special needs and concerns, and we want to be able to address them. Our advising population, on the other hand, is not very diverse. I sat here in awe as I heard Loxley describe his team, but my team does not look like that in any stretch of the imagination. And so again, appearances, just, you don't have to have someone of the same racial background or ethnic background in order to relate. But I wanted to make sure whomever they connected with in advising, those individuals would be able to, again, assist the student. And so we already knew that for a lot of our marginalized students, research has said that they are experiencing a number of challenges on campus, whether that be overt and covert racism, microaggressions, and a lot of them really don't feel like they belong at the institution and therefore are not as engaged with the institution. And so my whole point in reaching out to my advising folks was to say that these challenges can be even more exacerbated when a student's academic advisor is unwilling or unable to understand what their daily experiences are like. It's not a matter of whether you quote unquote believe them or you can or you feel like you have solutions, but can you empathize with them and understand that their experience is very different from others. And academic advisors play a crucial role in the establishment of a campus climate, one that feels safe for students, one that feels welcoming and secure to our students. And so I challenge my team to think about how can advisors work to affirm, support, and advocate for underrepresented students during their matriculation. And what some of the things that we decided as an institution we wanted to advocate for were that advisors should become cognizant of the mechanisms or methods of inequality, by committing themselves to the goals of social justice and exploring their own biases. Yes, because we all have them. I have biases. Every one of us on the panel have biases. Every one of the participants has biases. But knowing what those biases are gives us a better opportunity to address those biases and not have those enter in or negatively affect our relationships with our students. We also advocate that advisors really look at ways to integrate teaching, advising as teaching through social justice in order to have those difficult conversations with students about privilege, power, and difference. So again, I said, what are the ways that advisors could advocate for students? Simply advocating for students is just saying that there's some sort of public support for or recommendation for a particular cause. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to have gone through the same experience as your students, but certainly we should be able to help identify any barriers that our students are experiencing, any inequitable practices. And again, it's not just identifying them, but as an advocate, we have to be action oriented and insist that change come about in some of those particular areas. And keep in mind, as I talk about inequitable policies, and practices, I don't think for the most part any of that stuff is ever intentional, but it does exist. And until someone identifies it and challenges it, it will continue to on in the same fashion. In terms of support, we know that all of our students need support in one regards or in one way or another. And what we wanted our advisors to know is that that students of color do not share many of the same experiences that white students do. And until we have that in our minds and figure out other ways to connect with our students and helping to create other experiences, we're going to do our students a disservice. Any of you who know Virginia Tech, we're a big football school. And during the first few weeks of school, everyone is all riled up. Everybody wants to go to all the football games. Everybody wants to tailgate, and they can't understand why some of our students of color don't go, because that simply has not been something that they've done in the past, nor are they interested in some of the behaviors that go on when tailgating is going on. So I'm not saying tailgating is all bad, but I am saying that there are some differences that exists for our students, and we need to be keenly aware of that. And because of that, now we have created some different programming around our football games that a lot of our students of color attend. So they're still going to the games, they're still being engaged, but they just choose to do it in a very different way. So again, as advisors, what ways can we support our students to ensure that they're successful? Lastly, was affirming. Students from historically underrepresented backgrounds perceive high quality interactions as not only those that encourage their academic success, but also that place value on their experiences. So when we work to affirm our students, basically we're trying to support them by giving them approval, giving them recognition or encouragement. So whatever experiences they are having, we need to validate those experiences. We need, if it's causing them challenges or struggles, help them to figure out how to overcome that. But certainly being empathetic is key to being able to affirm our students in their process. So I just want to tell you real quickly, as a result of this, we created a 3-part seminar series that received raving reviews from our advisors, both faculty and students. The first is that we had a session on how to facilitate difficult conversations. That's not always an easy thing to do, particularly if it's something that we may not have experienced before. And there were some great opportunities to challenge our advisors to think more broadly. We also talked about cultural humility. I know a lot of people refer to cultural competence. I have a personal belief that we can never become competent in anyone else's culture, but we certainly can be humble. We can be practice cultural humility, which says, I may not know everything about your culture, but I want to learn. I want to be open, and I respect you and who you are. And then we had another session on power and privilege and how to use them effectively in the advising session. So those were all very meaningful sessions, and we continue to have discussions about those particular topics as we continue on today. So I'll stop now and turn it over to Dr. Pipkins.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. You've heard some excellent information on proactive advising from different perspectives. I want to briefly touch on the proactive advising curriculum. As you've heard, there are different ways of implementing proactive advising strategies across the board. But regardless of what that is, I think it's important to understand not to just use the term, we engage in proactive advising. The actual actions and how students experience advising is really what shows whether or not you have a proactive approach in assisting students. So I just want to share with you that when you as advisors, you have to develop an advising curriculum that speaks directly to proactive advising. Do you have advising touch points to where students specifically, to where you're reaching out proactively to students? Is this right before classes? Is it 2 weeks during the semester? Have you had the opportunity to review your data across the board to see exactly where those points should be? What's happening during midterms? Are we waiting until students say, oh, I have not studied, I haven't had a book since the class start? So when we talk about proactive, it really is looking at those barriers that perhaps may come, and before they even come, we step in and do something about them. So I think it's important to develop curriculum across the board to where when a student is having a session, an advising session, we are talking to them about their learning styles. We're talking about the habits of working and other current difficulties or barriers to success that they may bring up. Proactive advising is also taking a look at the student's holistic needs across the board. What do I mean by that? Oftentimes we're focusing only on the academics. What are some of the academic challenges that students may be facing? But do we gather some of the non-academic needs that our students face as well? Because if not, if we don't take them on the front end, what happens? We become reactive again when our students need to withdraw from the classes, when they need to fail, or when they fail. So I think it's really important to build advising curriculum that allows you to understand what those learning styles are, to help you to understand what the academic and non-academic needs are across the board. So I think it's really important to develop those in addition to some identified touch points. So if I come to your college or university and you say we engage in proactive, one of the first things that I normally will ask for is, let's take a look at the curriculum and what are those touch points specifically. I want you to remember 3 things here as well as we're talking about the curriculum of proactive advising. There are 3 things I want you to understand that you should focus on the transition, and that student's transition. What does it look like when our students are transitioning from high school now to the college world, or they're transitioning from being out of college or out of high school for 20 years and now they're coming back to school? What are some of those things that needs to happen with those particular population within your proactive advising approach to have a better experience for those students? The second thing would be structure. We want to make sure we provide a solid foundation for our students across the board. Again, oftentimes coming from high school, what happens? Our students, they're only used to one way. Their counselor or their teachers provided it all for them. But now as a college student, one of the things we have to do is provide that structure on the front end so that the students don't make some of those mistakes perhaps that they have in the past. And then the last one is being true advocates as a reinforcer. So I say the third thing is providing reinforcement for our students. When they face challenges, already having the resources there for them, serving in to be a huge advocate across the board. I think that's really, really critical. And as I wrap up here, I want to talk about your curriculum and what that looks like in terms of the communication strategies. How often are you reaching out to students? What is the frequency of that outreach activity look like? How are you communicating with students? What's the mode of communication? Do you have that defined in your advising curriculum? What student populations are you sending these notifications and the communications out to? What are your message topics? These are all important factors in building a comprehensive proactive advising approach across the board. And I'll end with this, because I use the term curriculum. I want you to think about every single reason a student would come in to visit with you. And for every single reason a student would come in to visit with you, there should be a consistent lesson plan. for every single student. And that's your curriculum there, especially if you're saying proactive. Am I talking about the learning styles? Do I know what their time management skills look like? Do I understand what some of the non-academic needs are? Am I providing the reinforcement that is needed across the board for students? So I'll end there so that we can have plenty of time for Q&As, and I'll turn it back over to Melanie.
Thank you so much, everybody. That was such valuable information. So we do have a few questions in the chat. Brandy, I'm going to start with you. A lot of people are asking for your Elon 101 syllabus, and if you're willing to share it.
Sure. Yeah. If you if you in the chat, I put the email address, but if you email us at elon101@elon.edu. If you email us there, I actually have a Google Drive of some resources. I presented on Elon 101 at the FYE conference in 2020. And so we shared some resources with the folks who were there. And so I can share that same drive with you. It has the sample syllabus and some other resources that we have in there. But yes, I'm happy to share those things. And if you ever have questions about it, you can shoot me an email, or I'm happy to talk by phone. We get a lot of phone calls from folks from other campuses that want to just kind of hear about how the course is structured. I touched on a very, very small portion of it. There's plenty other information that I could share in terms of how this spreads across the campus and our cross-divisional partnerships and how we make this happen, starting from orientation all the way through, starting from the summer, but also going to orientation and then moving on through the first semester. And so I'm happy to share whatever resources I can with you.
And speaking of resources, Jermaine, people are asking if they could get a copy of the things that you just referenced about proactive advising and how they should contact you to get that information.
Absolutely. I will put my email address in the chat as well. And if you would send me a message, I will get that out to you.
Okay. And then that leads to another question about what are other valuable resources for proactive advising. So I'll do a shameless plug. CCA has tons of resources on proactive advising. And then I want to also turn it over to Sean. There's a link in the chat from Sean about resources from NACADA that you all can access as well. Another question from the Q&A for Kimberly, I'm asking about the alternative game day events for your students of color and if other stakeholders are also participating in those events.
Yes, so we typically host an event of some sort in our one of our cultural centers. We have a number of different cultural centers: Black Cultural Student Center, LGBTQ Center, those sorts of things. And so they really rotate around hosting these events during the game time. And so students just come together, we provide food, we provide programming, and those sorts of things. And yes, we have key stakeholders across campus who are helping us to make that happen, particularly in student affairs. But also we have called on our Black faculty and staff caucus. Those are faculty and staff at every level at the institution to come and kind of hang out with our students during that time. Because as we all know, students have a perception sometimes of us as professionals, as faculty, and we want them to know who we are on campus and what we have to offer them and how we can help to advocate for them moving forward.
And then another question for you, Kimberly, if you have the resources and PowerPoints for the seminar series that you talked about, if that's accessible by our attendees today.
Okay, and I'll put my email address as well in the chat function, and you can feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to share any of that information. I will say that in most cases, we did bring in an external speaker to present those sessions. Not that, I wasn't capable of doing it, but sometimes having someone from the outside come in and deliver it, it gets a totally different reception. And so I felt like the topic was important enough that I wanted someone other than myself to have to deliver that particular information. And Melanie, if I could, just 1 second, I noticed that there was a conversation earlier about folks talking about what their approach is. Someone said that they are proactive, others said that their institution uses appreciative. And I just want you to know that they're not mutually exclusive. that you can be proactive in any type of advising approach that you use. The thing about proactive that I always want to emphasize is it is about intentionality. It is not about a student just showing up at your door and you just figuring out what they need and you provide it. It says, like Jermaine says, there's a curriculum. What are the specific learning outcomes you want for a student to achieve in an advising session? And so what is it that you want students to know or do as a result of every interaction they have with you? That's how you begin to build your curriculum. And you can use proactive advising strategies with any of the approaches, whether you wanted to be advising as coaching, advising as teaching, appreciative, any of that. That does not trump the ability to be proactive as well.
Thank you, Kimberly. So we have a few more minutes. I want to do a closing question for everybody, a quick answer. So COVID required everyone to make this huge shift and meet the demands or meet the needs of our students, I should say. What are you all carrying from what you learned during the COVID era into the next academic year that you'll maintain or continue doing with your students? Now we can go in any order.
I'll go first. Certainly, we learned a lot, and we learned a lot fast. We had to. I think I can speak for most of the panelists here that I've met before to say that in many of our institutions, it was advising that sort of carried and grounded the institutions in spite of all that was going on with COVID. I know that was the case for our institution. In fact, advising, we set up the first website, we set up all that, because we knew what our students needed from us. And so we kind of did that and maintained it until our communications department kind of caught up, and then they took over all that piece. But the biggest thing that I think that we learned is just the difference in delivery of advising services. I would have never in a million years thought that virtual advising could be as successful as it was. In fact, we saw an increase in the number, a significant increase in the number of student appointments because of the virtual environment and the fact that we were able to provide more flexibility. So moving forward, as we are all going back to campus in the fall, I know our institution is going back to fully in person. We've made a conscious decision to still continue to offer some of those virtual. So we're going to kind of do a split model for now. I would love to see my students in person. I'm still going to advocate to see my students in person. But if that's the only way that I can get them, as long as I can get a connection with them, then I will do that. So for first year students, we're probably not going to give it as much of an option, but certainly for our continuing students, we will continue to do that. And we're just going to watch and see how it goes. If it doesn't work, then we'll go back to all in person. If we find that we don't have enough virtual appointments, then we will switch in that direction. So we're kind of in a let's see how this goes phase.
I'll go next just because it's mine is very similar in a sense. We've learned a ton of things over the last year and a half. I will say one of the most significant things that we have learned is our students are very diverse, and I'm not talking about racially or ethnically diverse. I'm really talking about in the way they want to connect with advisors. They are really diverse in that manner. But as a result of the pandemic, we now have advising available to students until midnight. And we will continue those practices. So now it's no longer 5 p.m., 6 p.m. Students can see an advisor every day until midnight. So they do have the options to visit someone in person, make an appointment in person, or make an appointment for a virtual session, and walk-ins as well. We also have a walk-in virtual advising session. So these are, we have these available throughout the entire day from 8 a.m. to 12 midnight. Now we've established an entire evening team who solely focuses on that, who carries us through until midnight. I think what's also, what we also learned during this pandemic is that we want every single student with Dallas College to be case managed. It doesn't matter that it's 80 or 90,000 students. So now we are taking all of our resources and putting them toward ensuring that every single student has a point of contact so that they can be assisted holistically. So I think that's a really, really strong thing that we're doing as a result of what we've learned during the pandemic.
Yeah, I'll say the same thing. We at Elon, prior to COVID, we did not do any type of virtual advising. That wasn't an option. Everything was in person. We're a very, what we call a relationship rich campus. And so that in person was is very much a part of our culture. And so shifting to the virtual, I think, was an adjustment for everyone. But I think for our office in particular, I know for me personally, and the appointments that I had, not only with my assigned advisees and my Elon 101 class and my other advisees, but with drop-ins and with students who would come into our office and those appointments we placed on my calendar, I had less no-shows. And I think students, it was just more accessible to students. And if you can be in, or if students are in their residence hall, or if they are across campus in between classes and they don't have time to get across campus, but they can hop on for a 15-minute appointment, then I definitely saw a lot of that. And I think our students helped us to realize that. And so that is one thing that we have discussed in our office that we are going to continue. But I think it's also something that we learned, that we need to learn how to leverage our technology better, and we need to increase our technology and have better technology so that we can better serve students in that way. And so, yeah, I definitely would say virtual advising and thinking about that differently and what that means for students and their needs.
And I don't need to say everything everyone is, because we will be using the virtual advising because it proved successful for us. But one of the things that the pandemic taught us was how to be empathic, how to care for students, because some of our students are not privileged. And they did not have the structure set up to do Zoom meetings. So we had to rely on telephones, a whole old telephone, to be calling and talking to our student. And we were doing it from our home. So we will continue a lot of those practices that we did during the pandemic, just to show that we care and to continue to build those relationships with our student, those relationship of intentionality to help them from matriculation to graduation, as we promised. So those are some of the things that we will continue. We will do virtual. We still do the tele-advising. We still set up late appointments and early appointments. Our first appointments here at this university is at 7 a.m. And people will think that's ridiculous, but students clamor for that 7 a.m. slot. Why? Because I lead at 7 a.m. slot. I'm the one here. So there are some things that we learn, and we'll incorporate those into our manual and continue those to help our students.
One small thing I'd like to add, I know we're coming up to time, Melanie. Is it okay if okay. To build on what everybody has been saying, especially what Loxley said about care. Advisors care deeply for their students. It's also important for institutions to take care of the people who take care of the students. I see everybody nodding. So what I mean by that is to understand that advisors need to be compensated appropriately, have appropriate career ladders, because what happens is when you have a lot of advisor turnover, and people go on and take other positions, you're breaking all those connections that those students made with those advisors. And as someone who was an advisor for a long time and worked with some students for a long time, that students get upset when they lose their advisor. So it's very important. And I can see everybody nodding. Everybody here is very experienced. So it's just something out there I wanted to bring up too, is that the advisors are very, very key. That's one thing we learned during the pandemic. Advisors were the glue that held a lot of things together, kept those students connected to the institutions. And so it's really important to think about how we keep the advisors connected to the institutions as well.
Thank you so much. So I want to thank Sean, Brandy, Loxley, Kimberly, Jermaine for being here. Thank you to all of our participants today for sharing resources, for engaging with us today. I will be sending a link to all the resources that we shared, to the recording, transcript, and anything shared in the chat. Please check out our future CCA live sessions. Our next one is on August 26th on our 15 to finish or stay on track strategy, which feeds right into proactive advising, making sure our students graduate on time or in a timely manner. My email address is on the screen should you have any follow-up questions, but thank you again so much for joining today. Have a good day.